Hello everyone. I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I am going to tell y'all about my trip to Salem, Massachusetts for the author event Getting Witchy with It in Salem. In the year of 2024 and 2025, one of my goals has been that I've been wanting to expand my convention circuit as an author. And the reason for this is so that I can reach new audiences, reach new readers, and explore new places. Because I'm very much the kind of person where I don't really go on vacation. I can't really afford to go on vacation. And the only time that I really have an excuse to have something akin to a vacation is doing these author events in a city that I really want to explore. Earlier this year in 2025, I went to New Orleans in Louisiana. It was my first time visiting the state and the city, and I had an incredible time. I was so looking forward to doing the same in Salem, and I was not disappointed. So while I have been to the East Coast in the past for my modeling tours, I'd actually never been to Salem. So this was one of my bucket list places that I really wanted to go to, and I added on an extra day onto the trip where the entire purpose of that day was just to explore Salem and to take in everything that it had to offer. It is a big amount of effort to do these particular trips due to that I'm driving, simply because books are heavy. It would cost an astronomical amount for me to ship all my books and all of the stuff that I need for my booth setup and to fly there, rather than to just pack up my car and drive there, which means that instead of paying monetarily, I'm paying in time. So it took 2 full days for me to drive to get to Salem, and then it took me 2 full days to drive home from Salem. The event itself was also 2 full days, and then I also tacked on the extra day of exploring Salem. So exploring Salem was Friday, the author event was Saturday and Sunday, and then the days bookending that, Wednesday and Thursday, and then Monday and Tuesday, were purely just travel driving in the car. So that's nearly a week of time dedicated to this singular event, and I had to do the same exact thing for New Orleans. This is a huge amount of time to dedicate, and I'm really grateful that I was able to have this experience. And while I was planning on repeating these 2 events in 2026 and going forward in the future, I'm not exactly sure what my con circuit is going to look like in the immediate future, because unfortunately at the beginning of this year, March of 2025, I was laid off from my job. I was a part of the mass layoffs that have just been going on throughout the entirety of this year, and I just don't have the finances to be able to fund these kinds of trips on my own without a job, as well as the job market is absolutely a disaster. I've been applying to hundreds of jobs these past few months, and I've received nothing. No interviews, nothing. I have never experienced anything this bad previously in the times that I've been laid off and had to job hunt. It is truly the worst that it's ever been, y'all. So keeping that in mind, I wanted to get everything that I could out of this trip, because I was working under the pretense of I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do this again, or if I do, when exactly that would be in the future. So I wanted to make sure that I did this trip without any regrets, without any, oh, I wish I had done this, oh, I wish I had time for that. I wanted to make sure that I did it all. And y'all, I did. So one of the things that my partner Neil had warned me about, because he used to live on the East Coast and he had been to Salem, is that Salem is very small. And I really didn't have context for what exactly that meant until I actually explored it for myself. And it was kind of funny how small it actually was. So I actually sat down and spent several hours compiling a list of all of the things that I wanted to see and do. So all of the different historical sites, all of the different shops and experiences that I wanted to have, and fit it all in on Friday. And so I actually made myself a little Google Maps where I plotted out a little route for myself so that I wasn't crossing here, there, and everywhere in Salem, so that I could, one, save myself as much walking around as possible. So I made sure that it was kind of like a little line, a little tour, if you will, starting from one end of Salem to the other. And so I made sure that my adventure started bright and early at 8 a.m. And y'all, I was done before 3 p.m. and I had over 20 things on my list that I wanted to see and do. That's a lot. And the fact that I did that in half a day really showcases just how small Salem is. And when I say small, I mean that everything is just very compact in a very small area. So there's a lot of things to see and do. There's a lot of stuff that I actually didn't get to do, but it honestly was lower priority on my list, so I didn't feel too bad about it, as well as there were a lot of things that I just couldn't do because I just didn't have the money to do so. I did as much free stuff as I could, but the fact that most things were only about 1 to 5 minutes walk apart really illustrated for me just how easy it was for me to do everything I wanted to do in a single day, which made me feel really good about this trip, that I was able to really get everything done that I wanted to get done. Planning out this trip took a very long time, and honestly, planning out all of the trips that I've done this year in 2025 has been an astronomical amount of planning. And going forward, if I am able to get another job to be able to fund this kind of con circuit, I'm definitely going to restructure what events I want to sign up for and commit to, and how exactly I'm going to figure out the logistics of that, because I didn't really realize just how much effort the planning and also the travel itself was going to take. So the amount of time that it actually took to drive out to New Orleans and drive out to Salem, objectively, yes, I knew that it was going to be 2 days travel each way, but you don't really realize how much that actually is until you actually do it. So being in the car for 2 days straight and just living in the car effectively, where I was just stopping for food and eating in parking lots as fast as I could, going to gas stations, going to rest stops to use the facilities, and honestly worrying about getting to my hotels before they would possibly give my rooms away. And that was also a big worry that I had on these trips, because a lot of times when I was checking into these hotels, I was checking in pretty late in the day, sometimes as late as 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and that's just so late, y'all. A lot of times check-in is somewhere between noon and 3 p.m. So also having to coordinate having the phone numbers for these different hotels on hand and calling them to let them know when I expect to be there so they don't give my room away. It was a whole thing, y'all. It was a whole thing. It was a lot of stress. This trip honestly was very, very stressful, as well as, unfortunately, there was a thing with the Salem hotel. There was some complications with the hotel and my bank and everything, and it ended up costing significantly more than I had originally planned for, which is also part of why I'm kind of in dire straits financially today, is that I had a plan and unfortunately things didn't necessarily go according to plan, and now I'm having to regroup and figure things out. And I know that there will be some people saying that having been laid off in March and having the New Orleans event in June and July and then having the Salem event in September, that I should have just canceled these events and saved my pennies. Yes, I'm sure that would have probably been the quote-unquote smartest financial decision to do. However, what people don't realize is that a lot of this stuff was already paid for in advance. And so I would have lost out on a lot of money that I had already invested in signing up to do these events in the first place, as well as these were opportunities for me to make money selling my books, and most importantly, making new connections with new readers and audiences for future online book sales. Were these trips expensive? Absolutely. However, they were also very important for my career as an author, and I absolutely do not regret doing them because I also was able to visit 2 locations that I would not otherwise have been able to visit. And like I said, going forward, I don't know if/when I'll be able to do this again. So being able to seize those opportunities while I had them was just so much more important. Because at the end of the day, I've always been very good about when times get tough, figuring out how to restructure financially, figuring out how to make money to pay my bills and just basically live at the bare minimum. I've always been able to persevere with that really harsh lifestyle. I don't like doing it. It's incredibly stressful and honestly quite horrible, but I can do it. As well as honestly doing these events, it really would not have bought me as much time as you would think financially. It would have maybe bought me 1 or 2 more months worth of affording bills. And I know to some people that probably sounds like a lot, but the fact of the matter is that if we look at the current economic climate, and I don't mean the stock market, that's just a casino for rich people, I mean the actual economy, what people are actually doing, the fact that people are paying their bills with maxed out credit cards, the fact that there is record numbers of foreclosures on housing, things like that shows you that everybody is struggling right now. And then the fact that the job market, no one is actually hiring. 30% of jobs aren't even real. 1 or 2 more months isn't going to make a difference with that for the foreseeable future. Everything is just going to be difficult. It would have bought me that little bit of extra time, but that's neither here nor there. But having these experiences and making those connections, far more important than just saving a few bucks. One of the big things with driving out to Salem is that in the past, as I said, I did explore the East Coast back during my modeling days. I did what I called out East tours, and so this was where I would plot a route out to the East Coast and have stops along the way with scheduled photo shoots with different photographers that I otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to work with, and made my way up and down the East Coast and then made a loop back home to Chicago. So I am experienced with driving on the East Coast. I remember doing it in the past. And one thing that I've noticed that makes driving on the East Coast really difficult and honestly kind of scary is, one, they don't have a lot of signage. So here in the Midwest, we have so much signage on highways for what exits are coming up and how far they are and all that. On the East Coast, you can go a very long time between signage. And that can be kind of scary, where it's if you miss seeing the signage for an exit because a truck is in the way or something, you can be absolutely screwed with not knowing when your exit is going to come up. As well as they also have no lighting. So here in the Midwest, they honestly light up the highways like it's 3 in the afternoon, which honestly I feel like is the other side of the extreme. I feel like that's a little bit unnecessary to have it lit up so incredibly bright, creating a lot of light pollution and a lot of havoc for nocturnal animals. However, they have no lighting. So driving through these mountains in pitch black darkness and with these curves that just go straight off a cliff is really, really scary. When I was driving into Salem, so when I was finally on the home stretch, I was in Massachusetts and I was driving to get to my hotel the last 2 hours of the trip, it was dark. It was so dark. And everyone, of course, because they live there and they're used to it, are driving like absolute maniacs. And I can't see where I'm going. I can't see where the road is. And there were points where, honestly, y'all, I really thought that I was going to die. I was like, this is how I die. I'm just going to accidentally careen off a cliff. It was very, very scary. It was very, very stressful. And then having to get to the hotel and then deal with the issue with the hotel and the bank. And that was a whole thing. Honestly, by the time that I got all of my stuff unloaded and into my room, I was an absolute mess, and I like absolutely cried. I just sat down in my hotel room and cried. And bless Neil, he was on the phone with me trying to help me get myself back together and help me feel better because y'all, it was rough. It was so rough. So that first night in Salem was an absolute stressful disaster. Which I feel like really just shows just how much I persevere and just how much I'm able to put aside and be able to just put myself together and be like, okay, we've got stuff to do, let's get to it. And that I rallied, I woke up at the crack of dawn Friday morning, so the morning after this crazy disaster, got myself all dressed up, all my makeup done, and was like, okay, we're gonna walk around Salem and take footage all day, here we go. And I like barely got any sleep the night before, y'all, because I got in so late, had to deal with all that, and then it took forever to load all of the stuff out of my car into my hotel room, and then cry, and then get myself together and get ready for bed and actually go to bed. By that time, I only had like a few hours of sleep. It was rough, y'all. I was really tired, but I rallied, got myself together, and I was able to actually explore Salem, and I am so glad that I really put on my big girl pants and did it, because the experience of walking around Salem and seeing all of these historical sites, of getting all of this amazing video and photo content was just so incredible. And I am just so glad that I was able to have this opportunity and that I was able to go through this and just do it all, because y'all, like I said, it was a long list of over 20 sites that I was going to see, ending with a broom making workshop, which was just an absolute dream come true. It was so much, y'all. I don't recommend doing things at the pace that I do. It's very much a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, but it was well worth all the effort. It was so incredible, y'all. So to give you all the rundown of all of the locations that I went and explored, and there were a few extras in between, which was also pretty cool, was the Proctor's Ledge Memorial, the Haunted Pickering House, the Broad Street Cemetery, Hamilton Hall, the Joshua Ward House, the Merchant Hotel, the Rockefeller's Haunted Restaurant, the Salem Witch Trials Memorial on Liberty Street, the Old Burying Point Cemetery, Old Town Hall, Wicked Good Books, where I did actually pick up a couple of books while I was there that were specific to Salem and the history, so I'm really excited to crack those open when I finally get a free minute. So that was a little splurge that I made for myself. Really glad that I explored that local bookstore. It was really cute and really fun. They had a lot of great stuff. Highly recommend it. I went to the Salem Inn, the Witch House on Essex Street, The Ropes Mansion and Garden. This was honestly one of my favorite parts, y'all. It was this gorgeous garden. Oh my goodness. An absolute miniature Versailles in the backyard of this mansion. It had a little walking path to go through and look at all of the beautiful flowers. It had an enormous ancient tree. It was such a beautiful experience, y'all. And it was just so refreshing to have a minute to just walk through a beautiful flower garden and just enjoy nature for a minute. And while people who know me do know that I'm very much the kind of person who's like, I don't enjoy the outdoors or being outside, I do make the exception for that in that I love gardens, y'all. I love exploring gardens. They are just so beautiful, so refreshing, and just absolutely a balm for the soul. So I really enjoyed that part of my little tour. I also stopped to do a little stereotypical influencer style video that I put up on my Instagram, where it was me twirling and walking through this beautiful ivy trellis. And of course, I don't want to be that influencer. And so this entire experience of me getting all this content in Salem, I made sure that I wasn't interrupting other people being able to enjoy things. I made sure that I waited until there was a lull in the crowd to take footage, to stop and do my little video in the ivy trellis, just all that kind of stuff. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't that person who was yelling at people for being in their shot. It happened a few times, so I just retook the footage. It really wasn't that big of a deal. And because I went out on the tour that I created for myself so early in the morning, it really helped with that. There really weren't very many people outside until about noon. And a big part of that is because also most of these places don't even open until close to noon. And since I didn't plan on going inside these buildings, I didn't sign up to do any of the actual tours or actually visit any of the museums. It didn't matter what time that I was exploring Salem at. I didn't have any scheduled things until later in the evening. I had the broom making workshop at 7 p.m. Being able to just explore at my own pace, and I really didn't have a lot of people around, also helped me to feel more comfortable, and it made it a lot easier to get all of this content without bothering anyone and without me having to redo very much of what I was doing. I highly recommend that if you're going to Salem or if you're going to explore anywhere else in this same type of way, absolutely go earlier in the day when there really aren't a lot of people. It honestly makes it so much easier and so much less stressful. I highly recommend going earlier. I know it's a pain to wake up early, especially if you're like me, where you get in full cosplay or you decorate yourself in whatever fashion that you do. It is a pain, but it really is worth it to not have just hordes of people just constantly in your shot and just being frustrated. That was a big win on my part. So I continued my little tour to St. Peter's Episcopal Church, and then onward to the Howard Street Cemetery and the Old Salem Jail. So this part of my little tour was also one of my favorite parts, in that the first cemetery, the one that's the main cemetery that all of the tourists were going to, and they have like a little tour of the cemetery where a tour guide tells you about the history and all that. You can't go into the cemetery unless you sign up for the tour. But the thing is that the fence is so low that you can see the whole cemetery from the sidewalk. Whereas the Howard Street Cemetery, there was literally nobody there. I had the whole cemetery to myself. The gate was wide open and it literally just said, hey, as long as you're out by dusk, go ahead, walk around, explore, have a fun time. And I did. I had a wonderful time exploring the Howard Street Cemetery. It was peaceful, it was beautiful, and I actually did stop for a while and sit on the stone wall that was around the cemetery just to take a little bit of a break. The thing is, y'all, I am becoming increasingly physically disabled due to having hip dysplasia and EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so doing this much walking in a day is incredibly hard on my body. I was in so much pain by the end of Friday. I was so worn out. It was a lot, y'all. Honestly, I probably did way too much. But again, I knew that I only had this one shot to do it. So it was kind of like, all right, we're gonna suffer later, we're gonna pay for it later, and we're just gonna suck it up and we're just gonna do it. I don't regret doing that, even though I was in so much pain, and honestly, Saturday and Sunday were struggles for me because of what I did to myself on Friday. But because of the nature of author events, it really wasn't that big of a deal that I had to take breaks and sit at my booth rather than stand. It was totally fine, so I feel perfectly justified that I effectively destroyed my body for a full day and then had to spend, honestly, a couple weeks afterward physically recovering from that. But it was so worth it to be able to literally see everything on my list. I also, of course, just like when I was in New Orleans, while in Salem, I wanted to see if there were any paranormal experiences that I might have. And unfortunately, I really didn't have very much in terms of paranormal experience. And it was more so that I wasn't really going out of my way to try to find anything, to try to provoke anything, but just to kind of walk around, see if there was anything to see in that regard. The only paranormal experience I had was actually at Howard Street Cemetery. And while I was there, there were two gentlemen that were on the other side of the cemetery, and they had some equipment that made it obvious that they were there to try to catch EVPs and explore the cemetery from a paranormal lens. And I was just quiet doing my thing. I didn't want to disturb their exploration. And even with that paranormal experience I had at that cemetery, compared to paranormal experiences I've had in the past at other locations, it was just so chill. It was literally just a few ghosts that were just hanging out at the cemetery in full, the Puritan style clothing, the dark colored plain dresses with the bonnets, the little head caps, and the men in their tunics and their breeches, just kind of hanging out, just kind of standing there. It was just like walking past your neighbors walking down the street. It was very much that vibe. Like they were just kind of chilling, doing their thing, and I was just kind of chilling, doing my thing. I did not have any sort of negative experience paranormally the entirety that I was in Salem. I didn't have anything that seemed like angry or violent or even sad. Honestly, it just felt a lot like, because of how trafficked this area is, just how heavily of a tourist area this is, that I feel like all of that tourist energy kind of snuffed out any paranormal that there could have been at these places. Now, mind you, I also wasn't able to go into any of these buildings, so perhaps it's different actually being inside these buildings, but in terms of walking around the town, in terms of exploring this cemetery, and then walking on the sidewalk past the main cemetery, cemetery, there really wasn't anything there. That was also a big thing that Neil told me about, is that a lot of people go to Salem really wanting to have like a big hoopla paranormal experience. And I'm sorry to burst people's bubble, but that's probably not going to happen. And I've seen this with other locations, that sometimes just all of the intense tourist activity just really snuffs out the paranormal energy. In some places it's the opposite, where all of the tourist energy really feeds it and it thrives on it. But I really feel like this area really didn't have a lot of paranormal activity in the first place, and just all of the tourist energy snuffed out whatever was left. And I really feel like the main reason why I even had the experience I did at this cemetery is because there was no one there. Because this was out of the way, I had to walk down a little alley where like people's houses where people actively live to get to this cemetery. It was very much, you could tell, like people don't really visit this cemetery. It's not a big tourist destination. And even then, like they were just chilling. I also was there, you know, during the day. Maybe it's different at night, but I can say just walking around, there wasn't really a lot to be had in that department. I also loved that when I left the Howard Street Cemetery and walked toward the old Salem jail, there was this gorgeous century-old tree. I mean, it was just magnificent, and I absolutely needed to take a moment to capture just its majesty, because it was just dominating this entire corner of the cemetery. It was so beautiful. After having my little sit, I continued on with my little tour that I had created for myself by walking to the Salem Witch Museum, and I took some photos and footage of the outside of it. I did not sign up for the actual museum tour. I then went over and I saw the Roger Conant statue, and then went over to the John Ward house. From there, I went to the Nathaniel Hawthorne statue and saw the Nathaniel Hawthorne birthplace. And I finished up my little tour at the House of the Seven Gables. I took another break. Once I reached the House of the Seven Gables, there was a little low stone wall that I was able to sit down on and just kind of take a minute. Some of the extra locations that I just happened upon in between walking to these different places was I actually saw the oldest candy store in the United States, and it was still functioning. You could go inside and buy candy. I thought that was just so incredibly cool. There were also several old government buildings, and of course there was also the docks, and they had a big old ship that had the old style masts with the sails and everything, and just finding those little gems along the way, that it was kind of one of those things, you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't know about these specific places or these specific things, and so just happening upon them as I was walking around was just so cool. And that was also part of why I wanted to dedicate the entirety of Friday to exploring, was so that I would be able to have time to happen upon these kind of things. So now here was the fun part of my little self-curated tour, is because I finished everything several hours before I had intended to. I had my little tour take me all the way to what was supposed to be the end of my journey, to the witchery where my appointment for the broom making workshop was. And this is out on the wharf where all of the expensive fish restaurants are and all of the fun little kitschy shops are. And absolutely, word of advice, y'all, if y'all want to do the broom making workshop at the witchery, make sure you schedule your appointment at least a month in advance. The slots fill up so fast. Do not expect to just walk in and get an appointment. You won't. There were so many people when I was there that were turned away and were really sad and disappointed because they didn't know that you had to get an appointment beforehand online. So make sure that you plan ahead if you want that to be part of your trip. So because my appointment wasn't until 7 p.m. and I was done before 3 p.m., I had several hours to kill. And that was also part of the financial puzzle for me, in that I didn't want to waste money on taking an Uber all the way back to the hotel, being at the hotel for several hours, and then having to take another Uber back to the broom appointment. That would have been twice as many charges than I was expecting. And so I was kind of like, you know what, worst case scenario, they can say no. So I went there and I was like, hey, I finished doing my touristy stuff, waste sooner than I thought I would. Do y'all have any slots open in any of the earlier workshops that I could swap out for? And that was when they told me that no, everything is 100% booked. And I asked them, I'm like, so I don't really want to spend all that money on Ubering all the way back and Ubering all the way back here and da-da-da. I'm like, do y'all have a parking garage? And they were like, oh yeah, there's a parking garage. Make sure that you don't park in the parking lot over here because it's for this one restaurant and the owner gets kind of whatever about it. Make sure that you park in the parking garage instead. And I'm like, okay, cool. Thank you so much for the pro tip. So if y'all are going to that broom workshop, don't park in the parking lot. Park in one of the parking garages to save yourself the hassle. And so for this, I ended up taking an Uber back to my hotel. I just spent a few hours just eating and resting, and I'm so glad that I did that because I really needed it from being out in the hot sun, from walking all day. So it actually worked out really well that I had that break back at the hotel to just sit, be people, eat, be in the air conditioning, all of that. And so then I drove back out to the wharf area, parked in the little parking garage. And honestly, it was not a bad walk from the parking garage to the workshop. So I really feel that it was a good plan, although, you know, it wasn't my original plan, but it was a good plan. And also it worked out really well in that because I decided to make the largest size of broom at the workshop, I don't think my broom would have fit in the small cars that I had. So I'm really glad that I had my big Jeep to be able to fit it in the passenger seat and not worry about it getting damaged. Doing the workshop itself was an incredible experience. I highly recommend it. Absolutely. Even if you're not like a super witchy person, if you enjoy working with your hands, if you enjoy arts and crafts, absolutely do this workshop. It is so much fun. It's so fun to learn this new skill, to learn about the history of broom making, and the fact that all of the materials are all local to the East Coast. They are all local plants and wood and all of that. I loved that aspect of it. And also the instructors were so fun. I had an absolute blast doing this broom making workshop, and I loved that they gave you a lot of freedom with how you wanted your experience to go, and that they were absolutely cool with me taking footage of me making my broom. And of course, again, I always make sure I'm not that rude influencer who's like trying to be the center of attention, making a big deal out of everything, being in people's way, all of that. I tried to be as unobtrusive as possible. I waited for everyone else to go up to the little areas to pick out their broom colors, to pick out the broomstick, to pick out the charms. I made sure that I was the last person so that I wasn't holding anybody up, and so that I could have a shot with no one in it so I could respect other people's privacy. Just, it was a beautiful experience. Everyone was really nice, and it was just such a friendly, fun experience. One of my favorite parts of the broom making is when you are tying the bristles of the broom to the broom handle, you have to tie it really tight to make sure that it's going to be stable and you're not going to have all of the bristles falling out. And so they were so much fun, and they're like, all right, think about what made you really frustrated, angry today. Take out your frustrations on this. Now is the time to get all that rage out, to tie this as tight as you could. And so I put all of my rage and frustration with my financial situation, with my job situation, with the state of things and all of that, and just got all my anger out, tying that thread as tight as I could. Like, I was pissed, y'all. I was just having the best time just getting all my anger out on that. They made it so much fun. It just was so tactile. It was so relaxing. And I felt so good about that was the big financial splurge fun thing that I did for myself, and it was so worth it. And since then, I have gone on to get so much use out of this beautiful broom that I created for myself for personal and spiritual reasons, and I know that I'm going to get so much more use out of it in the future. So absolutely, it was worth every penny that I spent on it. The price of the workshop does depend on how large of a broom that you want to make. They have the small handheld ones, they have a medium-sized one, and then they have the full like broom-sized one, and I wanted to get the largest sized one. And it also depends on how many colors you want to add onto your broom. So the more colors you have, the more money that costs. costs. And then of course, if you want to add added trinkets onto your broom, that's also extra cost. Honestly, at the end of the day, the cost of the extras that I put on my broom was fairly inconsequential. It's really not that expensive to do a few add-ons onto your broom. So I did a couple extra colors and I did a couple extra charms, nothing big. Honestly, the biggest part of the purchase was that I added dried flowers to my broom. That was about $15, and it's because they're local grown dried flowers, and honestly, real dried flowers are kind of expensive. So, you know, if you're looking to save money, like, skip the dried flowers, but getting a couple extra charms really isn't that big of a deal. So highly recommend that workshop. And when I came back from my workshop, I saw that the people for the author event were in the area that the event was going to be held. And this is a really common thing at a lot of author events, as well as just conventions in general, is that sometimes the location, whether it's a hotel or a convention hall or wherever, will let you set up the night before. And so we were very lucky in that the hotel did let us in and let us set up the night before. And so I immediately rushed up to my hotel room, put my broom away, and started trucking all of my books and my setup stuff down to the dealer hall where all of the authors were going to be set up. And even though I was absolutely dog tired, y'all, like, I wanted nothing more than to just go to bed at that point, I knew that doing that one last extra push was going to make the most difference, because I don't know if it's the same for other people, but the amount of tired that I feel once I go to bed and then wake up the next day, combined with all the sore has set in, is so much worse than just doing that last final push, even when you're really tired. And so I'm really glad that I did that. Then Saturday morning, all I had to do was get up and get dressed. That was all I had to do. My booth was all set up and waiting for me the next morning so that I could just be ready to take on the day. So that was just such a good choice on my part. And it was rough, y'all. It was really rough. I was limping pretty bad. My feet just were killing me down to the bone. I was sweaty, I was exhausted, but I did it. And my setup looked absolutely gorgeous. I've just really gotten it down to a science. Even better, I was seated next to some really good booth neighbors. I was across from some people that I met at the New Orleans event. Those authors are so wonderful, so sweet. It was so great to see them again and to have a little chat. And then my booth neighbors on either side of me were so nice. They really helped me pass the time, just really keep my spirits up, because it can get a little bit monotonous at these kind of events, and it can be easy to kind of drop into autopilot, which you don't want to do. And having really good booth neighbors really makes all the difference. And in particular, my one booth neighbor was a really well-known author, and she had a ton of fans coming to her booth the entire weekend. She had a huge crowd of people constantly. And so that was actually really helpful for my booth, in that that was a lot of people that were motivated to come past my booth, and while they were waiting in line to see her, they were looking at my books. And there were in fact a few people who, while they were in line and happened to be in front of my booth, actually did buy some of my books. And so having good booth neighbors can make or break your experience at an event. I have had bad booth neighbors at events. I've had booth neighbors that were inconsequential, and I've had really great booth neighbors too. So that's a thing to keep in mind when doing these events, is make sure that you're meeting your booth neighbors. Say hi, introduce yourself, because these are the people that are going to watch your booth for you when you have to run off to go to the bathroom. These are the people that are going to set the vibe for the area around your booth. And these are the people that are potentially going to help bring people over to the area where your booth is. So absolutely make sure that you're making those connections, because just as it's so important to make connections with readers and to make those sales, it's also really important to make those connections in the community and the industry with your fellow authors. Another thing that I was so grateful for is that she was so nice in that she really gave me a lot of insider information, in that she had some absolutely gorgeous books. She had those books where the pages, when the book is closed, have like those little illustrations on them. And she also had a beautiful box set. So she had those beautiful books with the little illustrations on the pages all together in a nice little box that was super cute. It had the holographic foil design on it. And so I was asking her about what company did you use for that, about how much did it cost, not in terms of like, hey, I want to know all your business or anything like that, but just, hey, ballpark, what do I need to save up for to be able to take on this kind of step with my books? And y'all, I will say the numbers were pretty up there. They were in the thousands. I was like, wow, that's definitely for future me. That is not for right now me. Getting that information was so valuable, and the fact that she was just so nice and so open about it to share that information with me was just so awesome, y'all, because it really is a problem. I found really more so with the old guard than authors that are part of the millennial and Gen X generation really are more welcoming and offering help and advice and things like that. But I found that there's a lot of gatekeeping with the old guard, and there's also a lot of gatekeeping with newer authors, in that people believe that if you give people advice or if you give people information, that you're somehow going to steal their sales, which is just not a thing. Honestly, helping other authors and giving them information on how they can move forward with their books doesn't impact your books directly in any way. Giving that kind of help to people is just such a great way to bond in the industry and to help other authors to be able to find their success as well. Because I found in personal experience, the success of other authors does not impact you either way. It does not necessarily help you in your success, but it also does not drag your success down either. Because even though at a convention, yeah, people only have so many dollars in their wallet to spend, a lot of the time they've already determined how they're going to spend those dollars. So someone who is determined to seek out sci-fi books is not going to buy one of my books anyway. It does not matter. Them buying books from another author that writes sci-fi does not mean that I'm losing out on sales, because those were not my sales to begin with. So thinking in those terms of helping others is just a great way to help grow the community in general, rather than being worried about how that's going to impact your sales. It just really makes a difference just overall for everybody. And you never know where or how you might need help yourself. It's kind of you give what you get. And so the more that you are building a community with others and giving advice, you're more likely to also get advice. So just be open to helping others, especially if it's not a big lift, such as just, hey, yeah, I use this printing company for my books, or hey, yeah, this is the manufacturer that I use for these box sets, or whatever, is really not a heavy lift. To just give some people some advice, be like, hey, yeah, when you're ready to take on that part of your journey, this is the stuff you need to know. And that's a lot of what this YouTube channel is about that I've created for y'all. Is I want to take down those walls that people have put up with gatekeeping. They're just so unnecessary. Of course, there's information that I'm going to withhold for various reasons, because that does impact me directly. But things that are just, hey, let's just help each other out. That's what this channel is about, is to just give people advice based on my experiences and the things that have worked for me, and also the things that haven't worked for me. And then information that people who are more successful and more experienced than me have given me, I want to pass that information along as well, because it is a hard industry. No matter how you cut it, being an author is hard. It is a thankless industry in that most people don't see writing as a difficult skill to have. They think that just because they can write an essay in high school that they can then go on to be an author. People really underestimate how much time and effort and difficulty it takes to get a book published, whether self-published or traditionally published. People just really take for granted how much it takes, and also how much knowledge it takes to be successful in this industry, and also having to constantly re-examine and restructure your definition of what success is for you, because the industry is just changing so rapidly that the goalposts for what success is are also changing rapidly. So Saturday was the big day for the author event. Saturday is usually the day where there are the most readers who are looking to buy books, as well as this was also going to be a big day for me in that this was also the day that I was going to meet Mike and his family for the first time in person. I was really excited. And then in the evening, I also had plans to attend the Witches Ball, which was a networking event put on by the author event. So my day was jam-packed, y'all. Saturday was a lot. And again, I probably did too much. I probably overdid it. But again, we were here to give 110%. We were here to do it all up big, and worry about the consequences to our body later. And oh boy, y'all, those consequences, they hit me hard, but we did it. So I woke up again bright and early Saturday morning, got in my most epic cosplay of the weekend, because at any convention, Saturday is always the biggest day. It is the day when people put on their biggest and their best cosplays. It is when the most stuff is happening, and so this one wasn't any different. I put on my biggest and best cosplay. I put on my custom bustle by Looking Glass Garments. I've gotten so much use out of this bustle. I'm so glad I invested in it. It is so beautiful. It is made of this really heavy black brocade. It has these gorgeous embroidery designs on it, and the little pendants that they put on the rosette just matches so perfectly. I have used this for so many events, so many photo shoots, so many cosplays. It is so versatile. It is everything that I wanted it to be, and it was just the perfect accessory for both Saturday and Sunday. A particular accessory that I debuted during this weekend that I've just had way too much fun with since then is my Anne Boleyn headdress. I just absolutely love this thing. The attached forehead beads are just so beautiful. It just fits so perfectly, and it just added that extra magical touch that I was looking for. I just had so much fun putting these two cosplays together for Saturday and Sunday. I went all out, and while yes, this also added to my disability and my pain, because what people don't really realize about these outfits that I put together, they're very heavy. They're very heavy, y'all. All of that put together, because it's several layers of clothing, is very heavy, and it does over time pull down on your body. There was a college professor who did an experiment with their class in that they asked their students to hold a glass of water. And while a glass of water isn't very heavy, after a while, after 5, 10, 15 minutes of just holding a glass of water in the air, your arm starts to get tired. It starts to get sore. And so that's kind of how these outfits are, is that while objectively they're not like extraordinarily heavy, but wearing them all day, it starts to wear you down. Just gravity literally starts pulling your body down. And so by Sunday, I was so tired and sore, y'all. It was just unbelievable. But we persevered. And not only that, I had so many outfit changes on Saturday as well. After the dealer's hall closed for the author events, all of the readers had to leave. It was done for the day, and then all of the authors were gathering up their stuff to leave for the evening. I then had to rush up to my hotel room, take this entire intricate cosplay off. I had to put on casual clothes and then run back down to the hotel lobby to meet up with Mike, because we were going to go out to dinner and then we were going to hang out. And it just would not have been practical for me to wear that gargantuan cosplay. I would have not fit in the car. I would have not fit in the chair at the restaurant. It just also just would have been crazy. Yeah. There's a time and place for everything, and that was not the time or place for it. And so just throwing all those clothes and throwing on a different outfit and running downstairs, and thankfully I got there on time and he met me in the lobby, and it was just so great. I mean, y'all, meeting one of your online friends for the first time in person is always such a special experience. And then the fact that he was also my old boss at work was just so funny. And it was so great meeting his family in person too. His wife, Amber, is such an amazing person, and meeting his daughter. Oh my God, we had so much fun, y'all. It just felt like we had all been friends for like 1,000 years. And dinner was spectacular. I was also starving by that point. And we just had so much fun just talking about our experiences, exploring Salem and the different stuff that we chose to do. And they also went to a concert. They saw Trash live, and they just had a great time there, hearing all about that, hearing about all the fun experiences they had, and just really just catching up as friends was just so fantastic. And we even went back to the hotel lobby and hung out there and had a couple drinks and talked and chatted for a few more hours. Such a great experience, and I'm just so glad that I was able to meet my friend in person and we were able to just be people. It was so fantastic, and I'm really glad that I was able to make that work, that him and his family also went out of their way to make it work. So that was just such a great extra experience on this trip. And then after they left, I then had to run back up to my hotel room, and then I had to put on a different cosplay for the witch's ball. So I still wanted to look epic, but I also wanted to be more comfortable and wanted to have more freedom of movement, because I was honestly expecting this to be like a ball. I was expecting there to be like dancing and hanging out and all that. And I'll be honest, I was a little disappointed that there really wasn't a whole lot of dancing, and it just seemed kind of high school cafeteria style, where everybody was kind of sitting at tables in their own little cliques and stuff. That was a little awkward at first, but thankfully I found some people to talk to, and I had a really fun time. I met some really amazing authors, and it was just so worth taking that extra time. Again, just we're gonna persevere. Dead tired. It's like 10 o'clock at night. I really want to go to bed. I'm so tired, but we're gonna do it. And I'm glad I did, because some of the contacts that I made, those authors, I'm still using today. I'm still talking to today. An amazing experience overall, y'all. Really take advantage of those experiences where you can. If there is a networking part of the event, absolutely go. I know it can be scary and it can make you nervous. Going in a room full of people you don't know and the prospect of let's go make friends, it's daunting. And I'm not a very social person, and being in a room full of people I don't know is honestly not exactly my idea of a good time, but I did it, and it really does make a difference with your work as an author. Having those kind of connections is so important, and even if individual connections don't necessarily monetarily benefit you or don't necessarily directly benefit you, you never know where those connections can lead. And not only that, it's just nice to have familiar faces going to these events, so that now I have more people that I'm going to know at these events. And the more you do these events, the more people you meet and the more familiar you become with these people, until some of them do potentially become your friends, and you never know where that can lead. So absolutely do take that plunge, do networking events. They are so worth it. I'm really sad that I wasn't able to do the networking event in New Orleans, because my parents came along on that trip and I ended up missing out on the Witches Ball in New Orleans. And I hope that when I am able to do that event again in the future, that I am able to attend that networking event. That is something that I do regret not being able to do while I was there. So I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to be able to actually attend that here in Salem. So that was really important, and I really greatly benefited from doing it. Sunday was another big day. It was the second day of the author event, and Sunday is when there are typically fewer readers there. The big day is Saturday, so there are fewer readers, but the readers that are there, a lot of times they're the ones that are there for both days. So they'll spend Saturday hitting up the booths of the people that are on their list. So the people that they're like, yeah, I want to make sure I get their latest book. I want them to sign my books. I want to talk to them, all that, and scoping out everything, seeing if there are other books that they like. And then Sunday is their second big buy, where this is then where they buy books from authors that they don't know, that they're like, okay, these are the authors that I'm going to buy their books and I'm going to try them out and see if they like them. And so I actually made the majority of my sales at Salem on Sunday. I had a lot of people stop by my booth on Saturday and tell me that they were just looking. They took my business cards, they took pictures of some of the book covers, and they said that they would be back. And actually a fair amount of them did come back and buy my books on Sunday. Monday. And again, of course, this was to the surprise of no one. Succumb to Darkness won the day. Succumb to Darkness was the book that I made the most sales at this event, just like in New Orleans, so that wasn't a big surprise. But then it's always funny to me, all the books that people choose at events. I can never predict what books it is that are going to be popular at events. And at this particular one, it was my poetry collections. I sold more poetry collections than any of my other books. So Succumb to Darkness and poetry collections won the day in Salem. And I found that so interesting. And with New Orleans, it was Succumb to Darkness and my art book, The Asylum. It's always just so interesting to see the choices that people make at different events. And I've also had some people be like, well, why did those books sell at those events rather than your romance novels? Because don't forget, y'all, these events are romance author events. You are required, in order to participate in these events, to be a romance author, or if you're like me and you're a multi-genre author, you have to have romance novels available for sale. And the fact that people don't buy my romance novels at the romance novel event, some people are just baffled by that. But honestly, it actually makes sense to me. And that if you think about it, 90% of the authors at these events are strictly romance authors. That's all they write. That's what they do, which more power to you. It's a very competitive market. Godspeed if you can carve out your niche and you can be successful, because wow, it's hard. But if you're a multi-genre author like me, it's kind of a breath of fresh air for these readers who are walking around and seeing all these romance books, and then they see something different, and that catches their eye. And I've actually done an article about this in the past, about how sometimes being different is more important than being better. In that, if I'm one of the 10% of people in the hall that has stuff that's not romance, that helps me to stand out, because there's no way that I was going to stand out from the author that was next to me, who was just raking in all of these people that were there literally just to see her, just to buy her latest books. She sold out of most of her titles. She sold out of all of her box sets. She sold out of most of her books, just in general, just most of her inventory that she had there. There was no way that I was going to be able to outshine that with my romance novels. There was no way that I was going to somehow be better or sell my romance novels better than her. That would have been an absolute fool's errand to try to accomplish. But I sold a lot of books that were non-romance because they were like, hey, I don't know where else I'm going to find books like this, so I better buy them right now. Then after the fact, with my online sales, it's also interesting to see what books sell online after an event that I can tell are directly attached to the event. So based on the business cards that people take from me, the books that people seem interested in at my booth, it's the romance novels that then sell online after the fact. And it's so funny with the amount of time between the event and when these sales happen that it's very clear that they then got their next paycheck and then they went and they bought some of my romance novels after the fact when they had more money. Because that's the other thing at these particular events, is that a lot of times people will come to my booth and they will be very interested in my books, but they don't have any money because they already spent all of it. And so they take my business cards, they take pictures of the books, and then a week or two later, they then buy those books online. Whether they buy physical copies of the books or they do the Kindle, whichever, it's just always so interesting to see how those things pan out. So that's another thing, is don't necessarily be discouraged with what sales you make directly at the event itself. Also keep an eye on your online sales and see how those go too. So always make sure that each interaction with each person at your booth, that you're giving it your all, that you're not dismissing them of them saying, oh, I don't have any money, because you never know if they might buy something after the fact online. So make sure that you're always making each opportunity the most that you can, because it's amazing, y'all. Those after the event sales, you would be surprised how many of those you can rack up. And not only that, that means that's more people who are buying your books and then possibly posting about your books. I also had some people after the event post about my books that they couldn't wait to read them, or they posted them with their little lineup of here's all the books I read for September, October, whatever, and my books were included in those. So make sure that you're always having those opportunities and make sure you're making the most of them at these events. And of course, Sunday was the last day for this event, so then when the doors closed once again, all of the readers were out of the room. It was time for breakdown and loadout. And so while there were some authors that did do breakdown and loadout on Saturday, because some authors were there for only one day, so there were some authors that were only there for Saturday, and there were some authors that were only there for Sunday, but Sunday was the drop dead, everybody's got to get out. I actually added on an extra night to my hotel stay so that I slept at the hotel Sunday night and headed out Monday morning. And I'm really glad that I did that, because after I did all of the loadout and put everything back in my hotel room Sunday night, I was in so much pain, y'all. I was in so much pain. I was limping really bad. My joints were just absolutely destroyed. I was so tired that I'm really glad that I gave myself that night of rest, because I feel like it would have been dangerous for me to drive Sunday night. So I'm really glad that I gave myself that grace. Loaded everything up to the hotel room, because that's one of the things that I've learned. Do not leave stuff in your car if you can help it, because your car can be broken into, even though it's just books or whatever, the temptation. So I had everything up in the hotel room, and then Monday morning I loaded everything out of the hotel room into the car, and then I headed out on the road to begin my journey in reverse. So Monday I spent all day driving from Salem to Ohio. So that's how I broke up my trip, was that Akron, Ohio was my halfway point. And the thing is that it was technically not really the halfway point, because from Salem to Ohio, it was about 8 hours. And then from Ohio to Illinois was about 4. And the reason that I did this is because the real halfway point is Niagara Falls. And that would have been so much more expensive. The hotels in that area were just so much more expensive, because it's Niagara Falls. It's a tourist destination. So of course all the hotels were way more expensive, even though that wasn't really a halfway point. And I ended up having really big drive from Salem to Ohio and from Ohio to Salem. It was the best that I could do financially. And honestly, that made driving home a little bit easier, in that it was like, okay, the big haul is Monday. It's gonna suck. We know it's gonna suck. It'll be fine. We're gonna get into Ohio really late at night. It's gonna suck, and then we're gonna sleep, and then we only have 4 hours to get home. And so having the shorter leg of the journey from Ohio to home honestly really helped me psychologically with that basically home before dinner on Tuesday. And I was just so dead tired, and I was just so tired of being in the car at that point, that I'm really glad that it worked out the way that it did. So it was totally fine that it was like that, but that is another important thing if you're doing a trip like this, is make sure that you research your halfway point and be really strategic about it, and make sure you're realistic about what you're able to do, because with all the stops I had to make for gas, for going pee, for grabbing food, adds on extra time. It adds on about an extra hour to my journey. So really, the Salem part was 9 hours and the Ohio part was 5 hours. And then on top of it, the drive home, there was an extra hour on top of that, because there was construction, of course, the very last like 10 miles to get to my house, which by that point I was losing my mind. I was just like, I need to be out of this car because I'm about to just lose it. But make sure that you're honest with yourself about what you're actually capable of, and driving in the car for that long, it feels so much longer than it actually is. And make sure that you're kind to yourself and you make those stops to get a food, to go pee. And I follow the rule of, once my gas meter gets to half a tank of gas, that's when I start looking up, okay, where is the next gas station? Because sometimes the next gas station is really far away. So it's good to start looking it up at the halfway point, and then to make sure that you're able to reach a gas station before you get to the 1/4 of a tank, because there is nothing worse, y'all, than being at a fourth of a tank of gas and panicking because it's another 50 miles before the next gas station. And I'm not even exaggerating. That was some parts of my trip where it was like an hour before I got to the next gas station. So make sure you're also keeping an eye on that so that you can keep safe, you don't run out of gas, because truly some parts of this journey were in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know what I would have done if I had had breakdown on the side of the road. So make sure that you're planning ahead, that you're keeping track of that while you're driving, and keep yourself safe. Once I pulled in on Tuesday, I was so exhausted that I pretty much just pulled my car into the garage and just was like, I will let this be future me's problem. Other than my personal toiletries and stuff like that, I left everything else in the car, and I unpacked everything on Wednesday. And then I did book inventory, I think it was like a week or so after the event. So even though it looks like I'm doing all of this all in the same day, I'm not. That's just movie magic here. And make sure that you're also being kind to yourself and giving yourself time to recover after these kind of events, because they really take it out of you. And you still have so much work that you have to do after the fact. I had to unload my car and bring everything into the house, and then I had to put everything away. And then I had to do like 8 million loads of laundry from all the clothes that I wore, all the outfits for the trip, and then doing book inventory, doing my accounting with the book sales that I made, with the travel expenses, just all of that. It's just, all of it is so much more work than you think it is, and it takes so much more time after the fact to get all these things done. And even with doing this video, this is the most ambitious video that I have done to date. This was almost 26 hours of footage that I had to edit down to this hour-and-a-half video for y'all. That was a massive undertaking, which is why I am posting this now at the end of November when the event was in September, as I have been spending these past few months working on editing this video, editing it down, going through all of that footage and putting it all together. So make sure that you understand all of this takes a ton of time and a ton of effort. It looks effortless online because that's how we curate things to look. But in practice, it's anything but. So I really hope that y'all have enjoyed this video. I hope that y'all have learned a lot. I certainly did. There's a lot of things that going forward for these kind of travel events that I'm going to do differently. I'm also going to repeat the things that worked well for me, and the things that worked well for me might not necessarily work well for you. So keep that in mind as well, because what works well for one person may not necessarily work well for another. The best way to learn what is going to work well for you is to just do it. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to learn things, and that's okay, as nobody expects you to do these perfectly. Even if you've done these events 50 times over, you're still going to make mistakes, you're still going to learn new things. Each experience is different. Even doing the same events year after year, each event is still going to be different, with the different people there, with the different social and economic climate. Everything still is going to have its differences. So keep that in mind as well, and most importantly, be kind to yourself. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because it is really easy to overdo it. It's really easy to overexhaust yourself, to hurt yourself. It's really easy for those negative feelings to spill over into your performance at your booth and at networking events, to be on constantly, just all of it. Just make sure that you're keeping that in mind and you're pacing yourself. I have gotten to the point where I am able to honestly abuse myself the way that I do because I've been doing this since 2018. I've been doing this for 7 years. While I probably shouldn't abuse myself as hard as I do doing these events, I am also going through a lot that really requires me to kind of be like, you know what, we just got to do it. We just got to do it, and unfortunately we don't have the luxury of doing it in a way that's nicer to ourselves. And even taking that extra night with spending the night Sunday night at the hotel and going out Monday morning, that was a big luxury for me, and that cost me a lot of extra money staying at that hotel for that extra night. But in terms of safety, I really needed it. So it's a matter of balancing those finances, balancing your health and safety, just all of that. So be sure to keep that in mind with planning doing these events for yourself, is that it is all a balancing act. And first and foremost, your safety and your health are the most important things, because there will always be another event. You can always try again next year. You can always try again at another event. There's only one you. You only get one shot at having your life. So make sure that you plan accordingly. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I had a blast learning, putting this video together for y'all. So if you liked it, please be sure to give it a like. And if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.